All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming. This will be a really fun night. We're going to be hearing the story of four different students who went from having maybe more of a liberal ideology of some kind to becoming conservative in college in several instances because of or with Turning Point USA playing a role. So, really excited for tonight. If you don't know me, my name is Jonathan Bontrager. So, I am the Windy Territory field representative for college, which means I just oversee all of the Turning Point USA college chapters in Northern Illinois and Northern Indiana. Also, for anybody on here listening now or listening to the recording later, just want to let you know that we are having our annual conference coming up in just over a couple of weeks. America Fest will be in Phoenix, Arizona, December 19th through 22nd. And we also have travel stipends available as well as really affordable student lodging. So it's just an amazing opportunity to come and meet with 12 to 14,000 other patriots from all 50 states. Hear literally all of the biggest conservative speakers in the movement that you could think of. Ben Shapiro just announced he's going to be there as well. And I don't think he's spoken for us before. But yeah, people from the Daily Wire, people from PragerU, all the Turning Point people, famous politicians, anyone you can think of. Tucker Carlson, of course. So anyway, please come if you can. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our primary host for the remainder of this event, who is Kev Phares, who is the host of his own podcast called Speechless with Kev Phares. So take it away.
Hey, everybody. And thank you so much for joining. And thank you, Jonathan, for inviting me to help host this. As many of you might have seen on the flyer, this is about going from being a leftist to becoming a conservative. And while I didn't necessarily have that exact journey, I had just to introduce myself a little bit to everybody. I started a chapter of Turning Point USA at Illinois State University, which is a state school in Illinois, of course. Many of you might live around it or know of it. The Redbirds, go Redbirds, is at my alma mater, but it was an incredibly liberal territory. And so being able to talk with so many people and also being from public schools my entire life, I dealt with the liberal indoctrination that comes from teachers, professors, and peers constantly, basically my entire life. At one point, I probably would have been considered a liberal, but it wasn't because I was full-fledged into my political prowess, my knowledge, or anything like that. It was simply because it was what the default was. There's a common saying that's if you're a liberal while you're young, or if you're not a liberal while you're young, you have no heart. If you're not a conservative while you're old, you have no brain. Now, I'd have some issues with that statement. I'd say if you're not a liberal while you're young, you've probably woken up a little earlier than most. And that's what we're here tonight to talk about. If we looked at this most recent election cycle, we see that young people overwhelmingly are beginning to go more towards the conservative side of the aisle, while the left seems to be losing significantly. Not a single county that went for the more liberal ideology in 2020 was gained for the liberal ideology in 2024. Conservatives are winning. If you look within the last year, it was touted by many conservatives that young men specifically are trending much more conservative than ever before. There seems to be a revival in the conservative movement among the youth. Ever since like the 60s and 70s, the liberals had a stronghold. The liberal ideology had a stronghold, especially due to the anti-war movement. But organizations like what was mentioned earlier, PragerU, the Daily Wire, Turning Point USA have played an influential and pivotal role in changing the hearts and minds of the American youth. And I think it's really important to not only hear the stories of the young men that we're going to hear from tonight at face value, but also hear it for our better understanding of how can we change the hearts and minds of more? Because ultimately we have a country to preserve. And that preservation comes with not only continuing the track that we've gone on so far in changing hearts and minds, but ensuring that everybody gets back to a general worldview in which we don't have such a divisive nation in terms of our politics, but we can once again have at least a common understanding of what it truly means to be an American. And it's not only conservative, but I can tell you what the woke ideology is, what the far leftist, the progressive ideology is. is truly un-American. And I think that's what these young men are going to talk to us about. I know that both of them have a little bit to say. I'll be asking some questions. I know that they have their own testimony and everything. Everybody, I will give a shameless plug real quick. Look up Speechless with Kev Ferris, as the flag indicates behind me. I can guarantee you, you won't be disappointed with what you see. And if you are, you could tell me that in the comments section. It'll still help with the algorithm. But I want to start off with Riley. Riley, I've known you for quite a while. I would like to say I had something to do with you changing from liberal to conservative. You can credit me as much or as little as you'd like. But I just start off, give your testimony. Where were you at? When were you there? And where are you now? And where are you going?
So when I grew up, I was a Roman Catholic and I wasn't very much involved in the faith. Now, faith plays a very important role as to whether or not I remained a communist, as you'll find out. I won't use leftist, I'll use communist because that's what I was. I had a very strong interest in war and propaganda, and I very much liked communism because seventh and eighth grade, my teachers, my social studies teachers, had taught me a lot about it, and only that. And they were like, oh, it's great, it's glorious, all this stuff. And you're like, oh, it's cool. And you think communism's cool. And that's how it progresses throughout high school. And high school was the same stuff. Now, I had a US foreign policy class with Dr. Laser, awesome dude. I played as Vladimir Putin for Russia, and I thought Russia was very communist. So I was like, all right, let's just play it by ear, you know? And we were doing a North Korean conflict because that's what was happening at the time in 2017 and 16, that whole stuff. So once we get to university, Kevin, you are correct. You did play a role in shaping my ideology, so to speak. And so did my roommate for my apartment, my first roommate for my apartment. He was a poli-sci major, and him and I would have discussions about communism and stuff like that. And then eventually, as I became more Christian, I started to understand that communism inflicted more casualties upon Christian than any other ideology. 26 million dead with the rise of the Bolsheviks, 6 million in Ukraine, hundreds of millions in China because, you know, in China, like 300 million people just die in a war. It's insane. But yeah, as I became more Christian, I started hating things that were wicked and evil more and more. I have
But how
Karl
did you
Marx.
realize? I hate to interrupt, but
Yes.
I wanna understand a little bit. How did you come to realize that these beliefs that you held so close at one point, how did you come to realize that they were evil? And how did you come to, because you said you were a Catholic but didn't really practice the faith. You were kind of
Yeah.
a Catholic in name only. So then you kind of left the faith. How did you come back to Christianity? How did you recognize the evil? And how do you think it took a hold of you in the first place to get to
Okay.
that point?
Yeah. Yeah. Being a Chino, as I call it, being a Chino. So I'll address all the questions probably differently, so to speak. So freshman year, I went to university. I was homesick and I absolutely hated it there. I had two classes of sociology. The first class was Social 110, which is basically like this family class and all this stuff. And she speaks more and more about the nuclear family being destructive, like whites being awful people, all this other stuff. Males, especially, oh, there was so much hatred on males. And then there was just all a bunch of stuff like communism's great. You gotta love it because you know brings everybody together. And you're like, okay. And then I'm watching Jordan Peterson or Steven Crowder as the YouTube algorithm is just it's working full blast with me. So I'm sitting here watching Steven Crowder, Jordan Peterson, and you're like, oh, okay, Mug Club's cool and all that stuff. And you understand, like, you start to understand how bad communism really is because you don't really learn this in school. You don't learn the deaths, the casualties inflicted by communism, whether it be like physically with kills or like psychologically, which it was in the GDR. And all my family members from the GDR, they will not look at the stuff that the Stasi did in terms of like keeping tabs on them. They don't want to know who was watching them and that stuff. So it helps when you have a German family that tells you all the stuff that happened in East Germany. And then some other notes here. I was a part of WDC. For anyone that goes to Illinois State University and you stay in Waterston Towers, you know WDC is the Waterston Diversity Commission. It is just crap. It's so bad. I can't explain it.
So
Uh,
what is that? Like what is, because it's a diversity organization. A lot
yes,
of people who are
yes.
watching know what diversity, equity, and inclusion is. So what was this diversity coalition, so to speak? What was its purpose?
It was to stop what was called don't press A or like So in Waterston Towers, there's 5 different floors the elevator stops on, and the first floor it stops is 5 flights up, and people are just like, go take the stairs, bro. So WDC addressed it by saying it's okay to press A, and that's one of the things they address. And then they wanted to do other things where it's like bring everybody together under this big term called diversity. Now, I can't give you a real descriptive uh, definition for the term because I didn't care. I resigned after 2 weeks of being their president. I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I never saw anything else from WDC afterwards.
So you were the president of a diversity coalition.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay. So you were the
Freshman year.
president of a diversity coalition your
Yep.
freshman year.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
And
Kevin, you'll see the shift here, Kevin, from
I didn't even know that.
Yeah. So freshman year, I was probably like the most liberal I've ever been. And then you probably remember a group of Christians coming to campus talking about how abortion's bad and like how these people just got uppity about it and all that stuff. I would talk with them the entire day. You know, come out of class, speak with them, and then I'm like, why am I still here? Like I feel like I have to be here. And that's just, a call. To me, that was a call from God to stay there, to listen to them. And then eventually I started getting back into Christianity because I had dreams about my grandparents dying, and they eventually they came to pass, and they were true. So I spoke to my neighbor who directed me to his son, who's a pastor within the LCMS, which is a Lutheran organization. They're more conservative leaning than ELCA. ELCA, man, I can go on a rant about ELCA. But anyway, yeah. So as I became more Lutheran, or Christian, I should really say, I started to hate communism more and more. Faith plays a very big role because I could care less if I wasn't. When I was agnostic, I couldn't care less. I was like, oh, it's whatever. Communism's great for all. No, I absolutely hated it. Absolutely hated it when I became Christian because it was so godless. Like they don't care about a
Why?
God. They don't care about a God. And when I was searching for this quote up here, I came across like the Last Supper of communism, and I was just like, oh, dude, the blood in my veins started boiling. I'm like, all right, communism communism throws God out the window. They say that science can solve everything. They believe that transgenderism and all this other LGBT stuff is fine. It can do whatever it wants. If you want a good book to read Strange New World by Carl R. Truman. Very good book. And communism also believes that there are no penalties in life for whatever you may have. Like, let's say you're blind. Okay, you can do whatever you want. That's how I would say communism would take care of it. You could do whatever you want, man. We'll give you everything you need. Everything you need. That's fine. Now, that's great for a Christian. Good for a Christian to help his neighbor. But for communism, not so much. Communism, to me, and that might be a terrible example now that I think about it. But anyway, I don't want to see women on the front lines because I would say communism would do that 100%. The Soviets would 100% do that. So would the Chinese. But I think it's better to be a Christian than a communist, which is why in high school I would say that I was a closeted communist. And then I eventually became more communist. And then I became a Christian.
So
There's this
why do you
transition
think
that
you were a
happens.
communist? I want to start with that.
Oh,
Why?
yeah, 100%. 100% was communist because communism was cool in high school. You want to fit in, be like everybody else. Believe everything you're told. Don't question the teachers. Try to fit in with the cool kids. Don't talk politics, but you're all liberal. You're all liberal. You all assume you're liberal. You have your teacher who's going to start talking to you about in AP Gov about useless nonsense that doesn't have anything to do with today's world. And then look at my notes, making sure I didn't miss anything. Yeah, I think that's about it.
So you were a communist mainly because it
I
was
gotta
cool
say,
and it's what you were told about, right? And it's what you were told
yes.
to do. Okay.
Yep.
You
Yep.
said you.
Freshman year. Yep.
Mm-hmm. And
Yep.
then you got to say you said you started and
Yeah.
I cut you off.
I gotta say, freshman year was a wake up call because once COVID hit, I wasn't being indoctrinated as much in the schools. I had a lot more time to myself, and I wasn't homesick because you're at home,
Mm-hmm.
and eventually you mature and you get past all that once you move back to college or university. But nothing is as bad as throwing a bunch of kids into these gen ed courses and telling them that this is how you should think, behave, and act. And this is, things you got to think about in the world. Like, why do people tell me this? Why is this the only option? It's communism versus capitalism. Is there no in between? Like, all this stuff. And then you come to find out, like, oh, there's an organization called TPUSA on campus. Let's talk to them because they have a different opinion. Like, it is so hard to find a different opinion. As a freshman, I was just like, I'm sick of learning all this crap. Can I actually talk to someone? And that's why you were so that's why you were so beneficial to talk to. And
Oh,
my roommate. Yes, I will tell you that is the truth, Kevin. And I appreciated it 100%. Because my parents and I would get into disagreements because this is a conservative household. So
Absolutely. So you got all the way there, and then where are you? And so then you started to become more conservative. Would you say that there is a specific, like, obviously being exposed to a different opinion? At what point did it like click for you? Were you like, I know that you said a little bit about how you were having what I would consider God-given dreams regarding your grandparents dying that led you closer to God. But what about in terms of the Christian or the conservative ideology itself? Did that comes through more so simply because you were becoming more Christian, or was there something specific, a specific argument you heard, a specific thought or moment in which you were like, wow, I'm really realizing my worldview that I had is not the way of is not a prosperous, is not a virtuous way to live?
uh well while I was agnostic, I didn't have morals. And when you become Christian, you start to reinstate morals. Communism, or what I would call today's left, doesn't have morals. To me, killing a kid while it's in the womb is not right.
Mm,
Transgenderism, you can't play with God's creation. Like, as time went on and I saw more and more of the LGBT stuff, I was like, this is wrong. It feels wrong. Because even though I wasn't, you know, a Christian freshman year, I was still agnostic. I was taught as a Roman Catholic that there's only male and female, and you cannot change them or intermix them.
it's
And
in
so,
Genesis 1.
yeah, yeah, God created them, male and female. He created them, and people are just like they start getting livid about it, and that's where I was like, all right, you know, you're doing something right when someone is screaming at you that what you're saying is wrong and hurtful. That's how you know you're doing something right, because that's what they did to Christ. Screamed at him and threatened to stone him, and then eventually they crucified him for our sins. So, but yeah,
Absolutely. Well, I want to make sure I get to everybody's story a little bit, and we'll also have some time for Q&A at the end or final thoughts. But do you have advice out there for people that are currently maybe grappling with their own political ideology? I know you mentioned Strange New World as a book to read, maybe something more, I don't know, just a, a a snippet or a bite of thought that might spark something and act as a catalyst for change.
not really. Everyone's journey is different. I would say if you like doing your own research, do it. If you like listening to other people, do it. That's how I started. I listened to Jordan Peterson, and eventually I transitioned into doing my own research. And from then on, it's all you, man. It's all you. But trust in God, He'll get you there regardless, because He
I
did with
think
me.
I think you're absolutely hitting on. You said you don't have any advice. I think you hit on a lot of perfect pieces of advice. I mean, trusting God, absolutely. You even kind of hinted at there's a with great power, you have great power to learn, and that also creates a responsibility. There's Spider-Man for you, but also to whom much is given, much is expected, which is more of the biblical view on that. But I want to move a little bit to Ian. Ian, introduce yourself to everybody, and very similar questions. You kind of get the gist. Testify to everybody. How are you similar? How are you different? Where did you come from? Where are you now? Where are you going?
Yeah, before I start, I want to give Riley a shout out because I thought I was the one who's gonna have the most far left background because I was a socialist, but Riley's apparently a step ahead of me at that time. And so yeah, so my name is Ian Tang, and then right now I'm the Turning Point chapter president on at the U of I, and I'm also a campus reform correspondent and I was on Fox News this past summer with Lawrence Jones talking about how why young men like me were no longer supporting the Democratic Party. But yeah, but my background was that. So one interesting fact about me is that I actually grew up in Taiwan. I was born American, but my dad's Taiwanese. So my family moved back to Taiwan now when I was 5. But I attended like these American accredited international school growing up. And then pretty much in those schools, even though all of my teachers are American, but one of the reason why they want to teach overseas is because they hate America. So I was really instilled by off their leftist ideas. So and I was not really political until 2020. That's when the whole BLM movement exploded. And then because I was not in America at that time, I did not see the riots that were going on. I did not see all of the chaos, but I just took whatever my teachers were telling me and whatever the news were saying on how America is inherently racist, how police are bad, and then because those were the first like channels that really introduced me into politics. So I really just went along with it, and then that's when I started to pick up how, oh, socialism will be a cure for the inherent evil of capitalism. And so I supported universal basic income, wealth tax. Yes, I supported BLM at that time, and I thought Trump was Hitler. Um, and I thought we are all gonna die because of climate change and the whole world needs to go vegan. And I even did a presentation in class on how voter ID is racist and how the electoral college is unfair. And then, but there's this one belief I've always had, um, that was like the roots that really woke me up from the woke stuff. So I've always been pro-life my whole life. I came from a Christian background. Um, Opposite of what Riley has become. I'm Catholic now, but like my parents, my whole family were all Protestants and like Christians, and then so I've always been pro-life my whole life, and I also have that agnostic faith. But the issue of abortion just never really made sense to me, despite the fact that all of the peers I was like hating on capitalism with we're all saying, yeah, it's a woman's right, but the issue of abortion just never came to seem ethical to me until the summer between my junior year and senior year in high school. I came across a Ben Shapiro video debating pro-choice students, and then that really sparked a fire in me. And then yeah, that really sparked a fire in me and really opened up my eyes, saying, oh wow, there are really alternative voices than from things I've been receiving. And I just started going down that rabbit hole of conservative videos. So it started with Ben Shapiro and then Charlie Kirk. And then I really came to realize as I really um, came to understand the economic system that capitalism is the only economic system that's fair and moral and that works. America is not a racist country where we have to we take in half the world's immigrant, including my mom, and the BLM movement has turned out to be a total fraud, and you can't magically change your gender. So all of these like quote unquote conservative beliefs, they're literally just common sense. So I was lucky by the time I entered into college, I'm already sort of conservative, but I was more of like these like establishment conservative, like I thought Trump is still bad. I thought 2020 was completely fair, and I was still like sort of pro wealth tax, progressive income tax, and I thought Obama was a good president. And then in college, I really started to dig into not really conservative beliefs, but about the government, about because at that time, like my belief about the American government was still sunshine and flowers until I really came across on all of the abuse during COVID, um, how the Bush and the Clintons, they're essentially the same. I look into Edward Snowden and the Patriot Act, how the American government is spying on its own people, how the NIH and CDC really made a huge ton of money from COVID vaccines and gain of function research. And 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 also I mentioned on how I wanted to be vegan, right? And I look into that, and red meat is actually good for you. Like going vegan, not only does it not help the environment at all, it lowers your testosterone. It makes you soy, and that's pretty
You're
much my
right. I just
yeah.
like the way you say
So
it.
so that
Makes you
really
soy.
that's pretty much my position now. So I've become very anti-establishment as a conservative,
Hmm.
and then basically how I got into Turning Point was that there was this Charlie Kirk tour in Chicago I went to, and I told Charlie that I used to be a hardcore socialist, and watching his video really woke me up. And then that got on Charlie's page, and it has
Awesome.
2 million views. And then Turning Point contacted me saying, Would you want to restart your chapter on your campus because your chapter was dead? And then, yeah, I started Turning Point, and then I got involved with the Leadership Institute as well. And I published my first op-ed with the Chicago thinkers at U Chicago on my journey to based politics. And then I realized I wanted to write a lot more articles, so I joined Campus Reform. And yeah, this past summer I was on Fox News with Lawrence Jones telling him how like young people like me were no longer buying this like left-wing fantasy on how we're gonna tax the rich and all of a sudden cancer is gonna be gone and then the world is like no longer having any issues anymore.
That's
So yeah, that's pretty
awesome.
much my journey.
That's awesome. I have a few questions for you if it's okay. So you are from Taiwan originally, born and raised. At what age did you move over here? Was it just for college?
Yeah, so my mom is American, my dad's Taiwanese. So like I'm a
Gotcha.
dual citizen. I'm both American
Gotcha.
and Taiwanese. And
Uh-huh.
then I yeah, I was born in Taiwan, but I lived in the Bay Area until I was like 5, and then that's when I moved back. And then I didn't really live in the US, I'll say, until like yeah, freshman year of college.
I got you.
But yeah.
So I want to ask based on that, because from what I understand, at least the way the American media portrays it, is that Taiwan tends to be, because of their adversarial relationship, to put it lightly, with China. Taiwan tends to have a sentiment that's generally more pro-American. And so
Mhm.
it first off, is that true? And if so, how did you grapple with that, as a Taiwanese national coming over to America, being taught by people that had a fairly anti-American sentiment?
Yeah, yeah, that is very true. Like in general, yeah, people are way more pro-America than pro-China. But at the same time, this is why I think the leftists are so smart. They, like, let's say, for example, socialists or like communism, they will package it as democratic socialism. So it
Mm,
makes you feel like, oh, it's democratic, therefore it's gonna be good. It's it's not the Chinese Communist Party. It's democratic, right? And so like yeah, that's also how a lot of my teacher has portrayed socialism to me. They were like, yeah, Bernie Sanders, he's just a guy for the workers. He is not the totalitarian like CCP Chinese Communist Party and they don't appeal to me the teachers they don't appeal to me as anti-American, but like they appeal to me in a way that oh yeah they care about America, they want to make America better, therefore they're in support of these Marxist ideas,
mm.
but you don't actually realize that they are so anti-American until you realize how destructive their ideas were.
Interesting, interesting. And then my other question that I'd want to ask you a little bit is, you said that a lot of, your sentiment when you were kind of reaching that pinnacle point between leftism and kind of finding your roots in conservatism, was the BLM stuff, and how your
Mhm.
teachers portrayed it and everything. As a person of color, I mean, you're an immigrant as well. How did that sentiment resonate with you, and how did your mind change on a lot of that?
Yeah, so like initially when I saw the George Floyd video and then also a lot of the basically the edits they did on how oh police are just like picking on minorities, shooting black people and all of that stuff. I was like, yeah, I'm also a person of color and yeah, America, how is America this racist? Like I thought we are way beyond that. And then my and then big part shout out to my leftist teachers as well. They've been on the rants on how yeah, America, the police are trained to go after black people how um and how in some ways they would tie it to capitalism. I can't really recall it right now, but that's like how like brainwashed I was. But until you actually start looking into statistics, you actually start looking into um like the reason behind crime rates, it has to deal with like let's say single motherhood, it has to deal with like school choice, like bad education, it has to deal with like socioeconomic status, and all of it just like doesn't have to do with race at all. Like when you actually study these like stats behind demographics, and then you also came to realize, yeah, the George Floyd story, we were only told like such a slim portion of it. I'm not saying like George Floyd deserved to die or whatsoever, but if you actually look at the full story, like no one really knew George Floyd was on fentanyl when he was dying, and also yeah, and George Floyd, he asked to be on the ground, and not just George Floyd. When you actually look into other stuff with like relations between police and, let's say, like minorities, us, like, statistically, police is already a lot more tolerant to minorities, because if you put in crime rates, and if you put in like the risk of police dying on duty, in fact, like, if you consider these factors, you actually realize that yeah, the whole narrative is just to smear America, smear police, and that's how I really woke up. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we will get back to you. We will have a Q&A a little bit at the end. And if anybody wants to add questions in the chat, I think there is a ability to do so. So please get those in there and we will make sure to get to questions at the end. But I do want to get over to Jamil. Thank you for coming. We didn't formally introduce myself to you prior to, but I'm Kevin. Great to meet you. And very similar. I know you were listening into each of Riley and Ian's testimony a little bit. You were at one point were a leftist. You're not now. Where were you? Why were you there at one point? And where'd that transition come in? And where do you feel like you're at now?
Yeah, so thank you for inviting me. My name is Jamil Jackson. I'm a senior at the University of Chicago, was born and raised in West Philadelphia. I'm actually I'm the CEO of Chicago Thinker. I'm a staff writer and a political commentator. I
Awesome.
actually became a conservative by accident, and it's still a running joke with all my friends. And I'm not even really supposed to identify as a conservative. I'm still a registered Democrat, just for
Mm.
somewhat like social or like economic policies implemented at the local level. But generally, culturally, specifically, I'm a conservative. I guess before I explain how it became an accident, I'll say this. 2 years ago, I used to have blue hair, blonde hair as well. I used to be an activist. I went to Black Lives Matter rallies. I used to use other people's they them pronouns. I used to be sort of hawkish on treating people towards like the leftist standards of making sure we care about transgenders and all those social issues. I As I was raised in West Philadelphia, predominantly Black neighborhood, Black schools, under-resourced schools as well. I was obviously one of the, I guess, fastest learners in my school. And while I was while I was ahead in math and science and all those important curriculars, my school got rid of our gifted program and put students like me with all the other students who were distracting us, holding us back. And it's because of this mentality that when you take certain students out of the normal group and put them in an accelerated course, you're sort of diminishing the students that are left behind. I was sort of upset with that mentality. I would always do my homework. I had 100s in all classes. This school was way too easy for me. It got to a certain point where some of the other Black students, they would start to bully me because of my skin color. They'd say, "You're doing homework during lunch because you want to be white. You think you're a Republican. You're acting like someone you're not supposed to be." And it got to the point where it got so bad one day, one kid, a few complexions lighter than me, he poured milk on me during lunch. And he told me
Gosh.
to rub it in so that my skin could become lighter. And I realized like this at this time my school had a non-violence, a zero tolerance policy on fighting. So even if I wanted to defend myself or do whatever, I would have got suspended as well. And putting that sort of vision of, well, I can't jeopardize my future, even though this is like freshman year of high school. Dealing with those instances, but even though I was still very liberal, I then applied to one of the best private schools in the country. Multiple times I reached out to the head of admissions. He was very impressed that I was so persistent. They gave me one of the best scholarships they've ever given. Transferring there to where almost everyone is like their parents are rich or very wealthy, affluent people. This is a predominantly white institution now. And while I was at my predominantly Black school, I was being told to fear white people, that they were just Republicans, they were racist, they voted for Trump. And that's where most of my left leaning ideology came from. But the black students that were there, and there were a few of them, they were telling when I would go to class and we'd have discussions on the American dream. Class time just became boring, where you would have students parrot, well, African Americans, they're helpless. There's systemic racism. It's our fault. So much white guilt. Just to be devil's advocate, I would mention, what if the American dream isn't very accessible to African Americans because of work ethic or other cultural or social factors, not systemic racism? And word got out to the other black students that were there that were older than me. And mind you, these people come from money. They pulled me out of class one day, constant like harassment. They told me if I don't stop with my kind of rhetoric, that they were going to like attack me after school. They also told everyone because I used to run track. I used to be, and track is a predominantly black sport as well. They told everyone on the track team, you're not allowed to talk to him, sit next to him, and told every black person in the school at lunchtime, he's not allowed to sit at your table. So I'd have
What
to eat.
school was this?
This is the Haverford School for boys.
Oh my
And
gosh, I've heard of that.
yes, so I stopped eating lunch. I quit the track team after a while. It's really disheartening when you go to a track meet and you go to sit next to your team and every single black person stands up and walks away. So, and this was just me mentioning specific things in class, like trying to be devil's advocate or just mention try to interrogate a different point. And then this moved on to in college. This is during COVID era. I was so desperate for some kind of like engagement with the other side, I joined the Chicago Thinker. Now, when this is the accident part, when I joined the Chicago Thinker, I thought they were advertising this is a safe haven for conservatives and liberals, but the word actually said libertarians, and I didn't understand what libertarians meant. I thought that was just like another word of saying like liberals. So I joined, and the editor in chief at that time, Audrey, she said, Jamil, you say you're pretty liberal, but you're gonna be working with Trump supporters, like die-hard Trump supporters who are conservative. And I said, I'm not afraid of a conversation or an argument. Like I'm down to debate you guys on why Trump is a racist and fascist. So we spent a lot of our time, like hours into the morning, like 4 a.m., arguing about Trump, mentioning about his immigration policy, really going down the line. But still, everyone was still respectful, and they were still trying to convince me otherwise of why I was wrong. And then up until one day, I hated Tucker Carlson and Donald Trump. I was so bored. I said, you know what? Let me go to Tucker Carlson and see one of his most controversial clips about the white replacement theory. And I watched all of it in entirety, not just the clips that were being fed to me in my echo chamber. And I realized, I said, I can't really argue against any of the points he's saying because I'm seeing Biden's current immigration plan, and I'm seeing the parallels between what he was arguing and what's going on in reality. And I did the same thing with Trump. I said, wait, maybe this is just a one thing. I went to go watch a full Trump rally, and I was like, wait. So Trump didn't actually call white supremacists good people during that Charlotte's rally. So I started to, after I had that cognitive imbalance, I started cognitive dissonance. I realized like, okay, maybe I'm wrong about a lot of things. And it took me a while to sort of humble myself and say, guys, I was wrong. All of my conservative friends, guys, I was so wrong. Specifically on COVID, I used to tell them, get vaccinated all the time. We're doing this to help out our community. And I realized even after I got vaccinated and got forced to do many of these measures, nothing ever got better. It was never enough. The vaccine didn't prevent us from getting COVID. So I was the one that was revealing all the lies to myself. And now I even go to many of my leftist friends now, and I say, look, your vote doesn't really matter. You're from San Francisco. I wouldn't be having these conversations with you if I really cared about how you voted. I'm showing you what I saw 2 years ago, which made me do a complete 180.
Wow, that's a really, really interesting story that you go through, especially with the bullying you faced from people that were allegedly on your own side. Um, do you feel like do you see other people having similar circumstances? I mean, especially, and I don't know just as much as you'll never know what it's like to be white. I'll never know what it's like to be within the Black community. Do you see others going through a very comparable transformation or experiences? Is your I think your story sounds incredibly unique, but is it as unique as it sounds?
I think it is unique in that I think the way how things are set up, specifically in cities where there are a lot of Black people, there's an enforcement mechanism to where even if you have a sense of cognitive dissonance, even if you are successful and you do parrot many of like you're hardworking, you're articulate, there's a sense of you're always going to be the narrative that we've placed on you. And if you try to challenge it, I think so. Let's say my friends specifically, when they have become a little bit closer to the right, as I'm talking to them, like I'll say, that's what a conservative would say. Like you're talking about the taxes that are being taken out of your paycheck. You sound more conservative, and they'll laugh and they'll say, you know what, maybe just on that one point, but like everything else is still a far leftist. So it's still a push and pull. I think they become, because of Donald Trump, I mean Joe Biden's horrible administration, they become more receptive to having these conversations, not necessarily being convinced, but at least me pointing out, okay, look, we can both agree that this was a lie you were told, like Biden's condition, or what do you think about Biden telling you if you don't vote for him, you're not Black? So I think pointing these things out over and over again, slowly but surely, it is working. But I think with a lot of black celebrities, with pop culture, it is an uphill battle.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm seeing a question here. What kind of I really am interested in your story. I think you really covered, honestly, most of what I would have asked, except for Christopher does hit on the question. I kind of asked this to Riley earlier. But I'd really like to know the rest of your guys' answers as well. If you guys can all, as Christopher asks, can you all elaborate on the issue on which you've done the biggest 180 turn from super liberal to super conservative? What was your biggest switch? Asked by Christopher. Thank you, Christopher. We'll start with you for Jamil on that one.
Yes, that is a very, very tough question. I would say the most pivotal, the most important one, essential one was systemic racism existing. And the way how I see it, I always believe that I have a single mother. She has three different children. So the two sisters I live with, they are half sisters. We have different fathers. My father, he was killed by gang violence when I was 4. He had 7 other children I've never met, with other women. So this is a typical story of growing up in in a ghetto, where the very simple answer is it's because of systemic racism, it's because of redlining. And then when you talk to people who are critical race theorists, as I've taken their classes, they will try to talk about the racial wealth gap and anchor it in redlining and historical disenfranchisement. And it's so easy to be, it's like honey for it be when you're so young, and you see that these narratives are being fed to you by even older people and people who look like you, and people who are your celebrities who you look up to. That, and I would argue that to morning, to dawn, whenever, that I was a victim of systemic racism. And then I took a whole 180 turn, and I said, the only systemic racism I believe exists are the pop culture figures that are propagated to Black communities, such as like rappers, um such as like some celebrities who, and even politicians who campaign on certain things for Black people. Like, even if I don't agree on policies such as reparations for African Americans, I look at a city like New York City. The mayor of the city is Black, Mayor Adams. Spent hundreds of millions of dollars on illegal immigrants, but not on any of the policies specifically Black people there want. And I'm saying, even if I disagree with your policies, you should still have a chance to use your resources to implement them, so that you can figure out for yourself if your policies work for you or not. So I think that's the form of systemic racism I see. And then the last point I would mention is going back to the pop culture point. When you see that these artists who are very untalented, talking about sex, money, drugs, and crime, and they fetishize having a vernacular that resembles not having a grade school education, when that's being pushed onto kids who are trying to work themselves out of these dangerous and under-resourced neighborhoods, it's an uphill battle. They're going up a slope that it's too steep for them to travel on. And instead of implementing solutions such as when a Black mother stays with her Black her baby's father, that by definition decreases poverty. You have two incomes are better than one. So instead of, if you would really want to close the racial wealth gap, you would see a lot of these black leaders arguing for the low hanging fruit of, here are these very implementable solutions that we can do today and even use our platform to advocate for. And that's what I don't see. So that's the biggest 180 turn I made.
Absolutely. And I'd say even the language piece isn't even just a racial thing, it's also generational. Webster's Dictionary's word of the year this year is brain rot, in case anybody didn't hear that. Ian, I would like to know, just as much as Christopher, what the biggest 180 turn from super liberal to super conservative has been for you.
It's also systemic racism. And so my whole political journey really began with believing that America was inherently racist. And then until I really started digging, and then I realized, wow, Asian Americans were the wealthiest demographic in America. How come? And then I started doing more digging into culture, into nuclear family structures. And then I also came to realize about affirmative action. And I was just shocked, how does that even make sense? And if there's any instances of systemic racism, it's affirmative action. It's systemically suppressing certain race in the country in order to benefit other groups. So well, it's not just systemic racism, but pretty much I was like a socialist and Marxist, right? So my whole political ideology was oriented around that everything I see was horrible, was bad. So we need a revolution on this. So I'll also mention about socialism, which I used to really believe in. To be fair, I wasn't like involved with YDSA or any of the socialist group, but I was just a big Bernie guy. And then I thought socialism simply means, oh, you have good welfare, you have good social safety nets, you have universal basic incomes, and universal healthcare as well. So that's what I really thought socialism was. And then until we started really researching until like what happened in the 1960s when the Great Society program were introduced, poverty rates actually went up. And then the whole idea that we just tax people more so that we have a better system, it's just a complete fraud. If you look at how Social Security went up, Social Security tax was at 1%. Now it's at 6% and 12% combined. And then the whole idea that we are just gonna tax people, tax the rich people specifically, in order to benefit everyone else, and then create this magical land that there will be no more pain, no more hunger whatsoever. It's just a total lie. And especially if you actually look at how much the top 1% is paying, the top 1% pays almost 40% of the income tax, and then the bottom 50% almost pays nothing. So yeah, that was pretty much my turning point. So
Pun
really
intended.
just on how America is not racist, how there's no need of like a revolution to overturn everything, basically.
Absolutely. And Riley, your biggest 180 if you had to highlight a specific issue?
You probably remember this from our meetings, but it's globalism, or basically anything relating to it. I don't
Yes.
believe that God intended for all the nations to come together other than one. That's why he destroyed the Tower of Babel. So when I was communist, I basically wanted like everyone to be communist, and then everyone would come together as one. Now, as a conservative, I would say even more so, like someone who only likes their specific nation. I want everyone to have their own little country that they can call their own. And then I want us to all work together, not through the UN or some like EU, because that to me is evil, but just like together as people. And I think that's probably the biggest change. So it's different from systemic racism because I never had it. I was never dealing with it. But foreign policy for sure, 100%, 100%, because that's inherent in communism, the world revolution. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, everybody, we still have our Q&A open a little bit. I don't know how much time, Jonathan, do we have any more time? Because I have at least one more question. And I don't see any more in the
Yeah, we do have more time. I don't see any other questions down there either. I also have a question, and it's
You
okay.
go, Jonathan. I've been talking this whole, or I've been asking questions the whole time, so ask yours.
Okay, well, thanks, Kev. So I'm curious for each of you because, I've been conservative my whole life. I was homeschooled, I was raised in a conservative Christian home. And so I don't have the experience of ever holding to another ideology, maybe certainly being challenged or asking questions. But all of you have had the experience of holding, certain conservative values and holding certain liberal values and experiencing a change. And you've also all had experiences, from what I can tell, of being in different circles, affiliating with different people groups. And I always hear that the left prides itself in trying to be the ideology of tolerance and compassion and this sort of thing. And then I see conservatives always making fun of that when you see like the 2020 riots and stuff like that. Although sometimes I think conservatives can be so firebrandish in what they want to say in putting down the left and making fun of them, mocking them, that I can see how that doesn't always go over well either, maybe in winning people over. So I'm just kind of curious to get your all of your take on that, like how tolerant is the left versus how tolerant or compassionate is the right. Maybe any feedback on how on either side that could change. Um, yeah, what was your experience going from experiencing one and then versus experiencing the other?
Yeah, from my experience, so I mentioned how I was pro-life pretty much the whole time, and then I remember there was a time when I brought up the issue of abortion to all of my leftist friends. I told them because I basically assumed they're all pro-life as well, because I thought, oh, we're all the normal ones, right? And I thought they would all care about unborn babies. So I brought up the issue of abortion to them. And then they all immediately flipped. They were all like, how dare you? Like, do you know how many women in America die per year? Do you know like how hateful as a man you are? You don't know anything about women. And then I mentioned about I absolutely do care about women, but what about the babies in their tummy? Like killing the babies does not solve the issue at all. And then they all were like, "Oh, it's not a human yet. It's a clump of cells. It's and then yeah, like whatever pro-choicers or as I would like to put it, pro-abortion people would like to put it. And then so that's really that's really a moment that opened up my eyes of just how like intolerant and how emotionally fragile those people were. And there was like another instances where some guy brought up about why not we do like a flat tax? Why have like a progressive income tax? Isn't like a flat tax fair? And then that moment was so precious because none of us could really respond to him because we're all just so dumb. So um the two instances I brought up really expose how like the left is just really emotionally fragile, intolerant, and stupid. And yeah,
Well, and Ian, before somebody else answers, because I want to get obviously Jamil and Riley your perspective on this as well. What has your experience been among conservatives? Have you ever been in a scenario where maybe someone brought up a more liberal idea or seen conservatives respond maybe to an equal and opposite scenario? And what was that like? Or have you experienced that?
well, yeah, not to like glaze conservative or anything, but yeah, conservatives, we're all a lot more mature with dealing with disagreements. I guess it's because pretty much we have, as conservatives, we are forced to deal with disagreements. So I remember discussing like global issues like Ukraine, Russia, Israel, Palestine. The interesting thing is that we definitely have disagreements, and then sometimes as conservatives we tend to be a little more trollish when we are talking the way we talk to others. But none of us are actually that emotionally fragile, and then all of us could actually really talk politics and talk policies actually, and we don't just like go into panic mode and start name calling others and then just start calling others hateful for having the slightest difference of opinion.
Absolutely. Jamil?
Yeah, so how tolerant is the left? when I used to have like blue hair and I used to be far on the left, I would go into these rooms. I was like the co-chair of my diversity alliance in high school, and I would say to people like I'd have a lot of sway in my opinion as a black man. But I realized if you're a black woman, you get more say than I do. Or specifically, if you're a black woman who's trans or go by they them pronouns, then get more say. Like there's a hierarchy of when your opinion matters and when it doesn't. And then I realized, like, wait, why are we judging people's opinions by their sexuality or their pronouns or how they look? Why not by the quality of their ideas? And I found that to be sort of a priority on the right, which is why being conservative attracted me so much. And then specifically, now that I'm having conversations with people who are in the same position I was 2 years ago, like before the election, my leftist friends would say, Donald Trump, he's a liar, he's this and he's that. I'm like, wait, okay, if you believe he's a liar, I'm not going to argue that point with you. Do you think Kamala Harris is a liar? And they'll say, no. I'm like, so you think Kamala Harris is the only politician in the entire world who doesn't lie? And they're like, okay, maybe she has some lies. Okay, can you name one of them? And they would say no. So I think, and this is for anyone who's watching, the best advice to argue with people who are on the left is to let them speak. Just ask these open-ended questions, and to see when they realize that they don't actually know what they're talking about, then in order to start winning some arguments, they have to go back and do their research and realize they're wrong, which is what happened to me when I realized I don't actually have the content or the meat and bones to actually deliver on what I'm saying. And conservatives, I think, since it's so easy to be taken out of context, it's so easy to be canceled, you do have to come ready, prepared, and like knowing your facts and being able to articulate that in a very palatable way. So I do think conservatives are way more tolerable.
Absolutely. Riley?
I can tolerate people. I can't tolerate like really bad opinions. And like to me, when I was part of communism, pardon me, and I was on the left, I did not tolerate many people. But as I became conservative, I started tolerating a lot more people. So I think the difference is that the left, while very efficient at taking over the federal government and everything else, it's because they're intolerant. Whereas conservatives, we have to be bogged down with other people's opinions, trying to sift through what's right and what's wrong. And we just get bogged down by so many different things. That's why the left is so effective at taking things over. But their opinions are so invalid and wrong. You could easily just, as Jamil said, let them speak and they'll just show themselves that they're wrong. So the conservatives, put it like concisely, are more tolerant. Liberals, not so much, especially communists. They'll just like flat out kill you as they did in history. So
I get that. And even to answer the question briefly to you, Jonathan, not necessarily that I was ever a liberal, but I will say what I notice is that liberals have a pretty consistent streak of intolerance for those that don't agree with them. I will say I've noticed an intolerance from conservatives, but it's usually depending on where they are in their ideological journey. What are they learning and how much do they know? And how many of those conversations have they had to go through where they're being challenged? Because a liberal constantly, their entire platform is if you don't agree with me, you are bad. As the conservative ideology, the more you learn and the more you talk to people, you realize how much nuance there actually genuinely is in the world, and you become more tolerant. And so a lot of times the ones that I notice that are have a harder time articulating their opinion, they know what they believe, but they don't really know exactly how to say it. They don't know why they totally believe it. That's when they get more flustered and can become less tolerant. That's what I noticed. I think I saw another question down there. I don't know how much time we have. What are you thinking, Jonathan,
We
on
can
time?
go over 5 minutes if each of you want to just take a minute or two to answer this one. Do you want to go ahead and read it, Kev?
Yeah, absolutely. After the election, this is from Alicia. Thank you, Alicia. After the election, what kind of backlash did you receive, if any, especially those who knew you before you became conservative? So did you receive any kind of backlash after the election for maybe voting the way you did, thinking the way you do? Uh, did people know that you were a conservative? Like the people
I can
that,
go.
yep.
All right. So 2016, I told my parents, do not vote for Hillary. And my dad was like, gotcha. So they did. So I assume that they did. 2020, my I hate that I did this. I voted Biden and I absolutely hated myself. Now in 2024, I think the vote's obvious. But I absolutely hated it. My friend and I did the same thing, but we laid into my friends so hard that I'm like, all right, I gotta humble myself. So I told all my friends, and they're just like, wait, you did? Like you're the most conservative amongst us. How did you do that and stuff? I'm like, well, it's because at that time, dude, I was just like sitting there taking the CNN pill, and it's like, dude, you're gonna vote Biden no matter what. It's what Big Brother told you to vote for. So the flip there was it was weird. I didn't want it. It was so bad. It was so bad. But yeah, I had to humble myself and I had to swallow the insults. But yeah, it goes both ways. It goes both ways.
Absolutely. Jamil?
Yeah, so right after class, after the election, so I wore my MAGA hat to class. Me and one of my friends, we did, and this one kid who's rabid, looks like Thomas Crooks, the guy who tried to assassinate Donald
Mm.
Trump. So he's already giving off school shooter vibes. He approaches me after class, like jumps at me. He calls me a fag. He says, we're coming after you. And he says, like, you're not safe. He's like, he disparages MAGA. And I'm just walking away from him. Like, I don't want this to turn into an altercation. He's obviously crazy. And then I want nothing to be a part of this. So that was the kind of backlash I faced. I had to get the university involved to like send him like a
Mm.
stay the hell away from me order. And then specifically with my mother, she called me, she said I was white-minded. She said, you're just
Wow.
focused on what's best for white Americans. And I think in a very like in a very terse way of saying this, there's some humility you have to take in saving people from a bad decision they were going to make and then blame you for why they made that bad decision. Like if Kamala Harris had a horrible administration, she was no doubtly going to blame Republicans for why it was going to be a horrible, like why those things were transpiring. So I think I just brush it off my shoulder and say, this is a sacrifice you have to make.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Interesting to hear about the familial shift as well from both of you guys. Ian?
Yeah, so for pretty much everyone who knows me knows that I'm a conservative, so I didn't really receive any backlash besides about like 30 people unfollow me on Instagram because I went on a trolling streak on my story after Trump won. And basically, my Turning Point chapter, I'm not sure if this is allowed by Turning Point, so I apologize to Turning Point first, but we hosted like a bar social at
It was unofficial. It
at
was not Turning Point sanctioned. It just
unofficial.
happened to
Yeah,
be
it
the
was
friends that you had
friends. Yes,
Yep.
exactly.
that
And
were
then
from
we
Turning
and we
Point.
were like, everyone who wants to come needs to wear either a MAGA hat or anything patriotic. So yeah, we all went to a bar with our MAGA hat, and then there were two crazy girls that were trying to steal my hat. But everyone else, at least 15 people, came up to me telling me I'm a legend for wearing it and saying that let's go. And then the majority of people who came up to me were girls. So yeah, my final message will be there's a lot more of us now. The culture has shifted. And then yeah, do not be afraid as a conservative.
Absolutely. And I know we're running up against the clock here. I wanted to ask this last question. Very short answers from everybody. Um, a lot of studies, specifically, I know there's one from Tufts that show that conservatives are marginally happier than liberals. Liberals tend to have higher rates of depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, et cetera, mental health issues. Do you guys find that now that you identify much more on the conservative side of things, that you are happier? Yes or no? Riley?
All right, thankfully you went with me first. Yeah, no, your ideology has nothing to do with your happiness. It is whether or not you
Interesting.
find purpose in life. If you find purpose in life, you're set. And that purpose comes from God, in my humble but honest opinion. Honestly, I was not happy as a liberal. I was not happy as a conservative until I found God. So that's what it was for me. It may be different for other people, but to me, happiness is not the goal in life. It is what you get as you go through life. It's your purpose that matters.
I love that. Ian?
Yeah, for me, it absolutely makes sense that conservatives are happier. If you just think of it, that conservatives are churchgoers, we believe in God, we go to the gym, we eat red meat, and then we don't just like, we're not emotionally fragile. And Riley mentioned about going to God. Well, I believe if you actually go to God, that will automatically turn your worldview conservative already. Um, so yeah, I'm not surprised that there's a study saying how
And you're
liberals,
happier
yeah.
yourself personally?
Oh, hell yes. Like, yeah, I am so much happier, so much healthier mentally and physically. And I love God.
It's good to hear. Jamil?
Yes, I'm 100% more happy. I think a lot with a lot of leftists, they've convinced themselves that they are depressed, and it's sort of oppressed. And it's sort of what Kanye West said, that when slavery was a choice, sort of what like being oppressed in nowadays in the richest country in the world, the most privileged place to be, it is a choice to be up to think you're oppressed, and then that affects you drugging your children with antidepressants, with how your friendships are, how you treat people, how you want to be treated. So 100% I'm 100 like more happy than I am than I've ever been.
Well, consider all of that for anybody watching. Consider that a sales pitch. If you're not conservative, if you're not turning to God in some way, maybe consider it. And when you're considering things, also definitely go check out Speechless with Kev Phares pretty much anywhere you want: Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, all that stuff. Like, subscribe, share, and follow. And Jonathan, take us home.
Yeah, no, thank you all again so much for coming on here, for sharing your stories. We were originally going to have four, but very happy for all three of you. And I really like just the comments on the end from a couple of you of just the vital role that faith in God plays as well. And just seeing the connection between your values and your ideology politically as well as your faith is really cool. And I think we're definitely seeing a shift, not just in the political side of what we talked about today, but the spiritual side as well in our country. And so I think that's really encouraging to see more people going to God. Other than that, like I said at the beginning, in case anybody didn't hear it then, America Fest is coming up soon, December 19th through 22nd in Phoenix, Arizona. So make sure you get your tickets. And other than that, again, thank you all for being here, and God bless.
Thanks for having us, Jonathan. Also, where
course.
would we be able to find the recording?
It'll be on my YouTube channel, I can tell you that.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Well, thank you all again. Have a good night.
Absolutely. God bless you.
have a great night.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Jonathan.
guys.
Later, Ian. Later, Kev.